could there be a better way to kick off today? Good afternoon and good morning, depending on whereabouts you are in the world today. Welcome to the SpeakIn Asia's Dialogues, Diversity and Inclusion Summit in partnership with HDFC Ergo's Sharing Circles. We're here to celebrate something that is so incredibly important. I don't think there could be a better way to spend the middle of the week. To celebrate human differences, to look at diversity and inclusion, and how we all enjoy, encourage, and celebrate this in our businesses. That is what we are here to do as a group of experts, and indeed a phenomenal audience today. My name's Mimi Nicklin. I'm your host for this afternoon's event, and I couldn't be more proud to be here with the team around me and the people you're going to hear from today, all of whom have phenomenal talent, experience, and opinion in this area. I'm an author and I'm incredibly passionate about organizational empathy and how we build understanding and inclusion into our world and our workplaces. And I think today is going to be of huge value. So what are we going to do? What is the agenda for today? First of all, we're going to have a welcome address to set the tone. We're then going to have a very, very exciting keynote to follow there. We're then going to move into a 1 hour long discussion with a panel around D&I, for which we have some phenomenal members from all over the world across time zones today. And that will be followed by a very exciting part of today's procedures, which is the celebration of our D&I champions. There are 10 of them, and they've all been awarded for their work in this space to change our world and to create a ripple, hopefully onwards from there. I will, of course, be back with you across the event, giving you details of each speaker, the panelists, and all of the award winners. But to set the ball rolling today and to kick off, I want to open up with our welcome address, which is from Deepshikha Kumar, who's the founder and CEO at SpeakIn. So Deepshikha, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mimi. It's such a pleasure to be here with such a diverse audience, and I think the diversity has also been reflected in my name that Mimi just took. But it was nice, and but it's such an honor. And as I open, I'm sure that there are dignitaries here, there are thought leaders here, and who would of course talk about the topic. I'll just mention 3 things here today. Number 1, why Singapore? Number 2, why SpeakIn? And number 3, what do we look forward to more on this topic and beyond in the region? Number 1, why Singapore? I think Singapore is the hub and the heartbeat, if I can call it, of the business activity in the region. Asia is such a beautifully diverse continent, and D&I in Asia means a different word to everybody in Asia. To India, it means something else. To Indonesia, it means another. To Singapore, another. And if you go further down to Australia and to New Zealand, and Anthea can talk more about it later on, it means a completely different world. Now, number 2 is why SpeakIn. SpeakIn is Asia's largest network of experts and thought leaders, and it is our honor to instigate, to bring about conversations which are of value and of resonance to the current global ecosystem. And this is where we are bringing in a conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 3, what do we want to take away from this? We want to bring Number 1, we want to bring in stories of beautiful action that each of you have taken in your own respective worlds, and to bring it out to the world, which others can learn from, and therefore to instigate a larger conversation that will help those who are still getting on this journey. So thank you very much, Mimi, and thank you very much the entire diaspora, our esteemed panelists, our revered awardees today to be here with us. And over to you, Mimi, back. I look forward to a wonderful conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction and for bringing us all together in the same part of the world, even though we're so far apart. We're now going to move on to our keynote for today, which I know Nandini Sarkar is going to take us through. He is the Executive Director, President and Chief Business Officer of Apollo Tyres. And I'd like to call upon you, Sunam, to join us and set the scene for our keynote today at the D&I Summit.
Thank you very much, Mimi. Good afternoon, hello, good morning, It's an honor to be here today and deliver the keynote address to such a distinguished audience. My thanks to Deepshikha and her team at SpeakIn for inviting me. Let me also compliment you on the tremendous job that you all are doing. Speaking of the speakers, Mimi mentioned talent, experience, and opinion. Speaking for myself, I don't know about talent and experience, but I certainly have opinions that I can impose on you. So let me start off on the topic of the day. Diversity and inclusion has been said to be all about creating a culture of belonging and making an organization complete and successful. But a colleague shared with me a simpler definition, which I really like and would like to share with you. She said, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Let me set the ball rolling by talking about some of the top myths around D&I that I come across and feel need to be busted. The first one, diversity is about gender and race. While traits like gender and race tend to come to mind immediately when we hear the word diversity, other traits like age, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, thinking style, cultural background, marital status, political affiliation, and others need to be recognized as well. Acknowledging the full spectrum of traits is a key factor in encouraging an inclusive environment. The second myth, unconscious bias workshops can infuse inclusion. Yes, prejudice starts with identifying our unconscious biases, and more importantly, the blind spots. While trying to rewire our brains to welcome differences is a good start, is it enough to breed inclusivity and undo the biases? What of our environments outside of these workshops? Do we pay sufficient attention to that? Myth number 3, diversity hiring meets all targets. Yes, sure, it will help meet the diversity target, but will not ensure inclusion. Remember, it will only work as an invitation to the party. We need a whole spectrum of initiatives to ensure that this is backed well for inclusion. The fourth myth, diversity hiring means lowering the bar. And this is really one of my pet peeves. This is symptomatic of an underlying belief that the average performance of minorities across gender and race is less than the overall mean. We first need to break this barrier in our own thinking. In no way is it a reduction of anything that we are expecting. The fifth one, D&I is a human resources responsibility. While it's common to find D&I staff and initiatives led by human resources, organizations who have fully embraced D&I have often made it a leadership imperative. If it's not owned at the very top, if the culture is not driven from the very top and from functional leaders and from business leaders, I don't think HR can do anything. We as leaders need to own it, sponsor it, and embrace it. Promoting diversity and inclusion needs to go beyond mere words. I know we have a distinguished panel that will delve into this in much greater detail. So let me step back. I do hope that today's discussion will trigger thoughts and actions in each of us that we can take back to our organizations and start making a difference. Thank you for your attention. Stay safe.
Wonderful. Sunam, thank you so much for those thoughts. I absolutely loved the idea of being invited to dance. I mean, what a beautiful way to actually explain what we're talking about today when we talk about inclusion and bringing people in and not just standing on the sidelines, but being involved. So Sunam, thank you so much for inspiring us all today. I'm now going to call on Sanjeev to introduce our panel and to dive into those themes. This segment of the summit is really to unpack many of these opinions from leaders across the world. It's going to be led by Sanjeev Verma. He's a writer and a broadcaster, and he's now the content head with SpeakIn. So Sanjeev, over to you.
Thank you, Mimi. The best first step toward designing a successful inclusion strategy for a diverse workplace is really to listen to what your people are saying. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but true listening is in short supply in our frenetic, hierarchical world. But today we have an exceptional panel that will, over the next hour or so, give us perspectives on D&I. Let me introduce them. Anthea Collier, she's the Human Resource Leader and Managing Director, APAC of Randstad. Michael Brown, he's award-winning author, D&I evangelist, and CEO of Associate of United Kingdom. Renee Tan, she's a business transformation leader and Managing Director of Hashtags. Alexander Krasovin, Chief Commercial Officer, Human Capital Solutions, APAC for Aon. Arvinder Gujral, he's former Managing Director, Southeast Asia of Twitter. And Sudakshana Bhattacharya, she's the Chief Human Resources Officer of HDFC Ergo General Insurance. And moderating the discussion is Deepshikha Kumar, founder and CEO of SpeakIn. Here's our own Deepshikha.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Once again, an honor, an absolute honor. Without further ado, let me bring our wonderful panelists forward. And in no particular order, may I please start with an opening remark from our panelists on the topic, on the way forward, their learnings and the journey forwards for Asia in particular. Let me start by inviting my very dear Anthea Collier to share her thoughts.
Thank you so much. And it's so great to be here with such a distinguished group of like-minded colleagues across various countries. So thank you for this opportunity. I am the Managing Director of Randstad. Randstad is a 20.7 billion euro organization, and effectively we find talent for our client organizations. Now, the division of Randstad that I lead is the outsourcing division. So when we undertake hiring for our clients, we do so in the thousands, and we do so across 14 countries, which can be challenging. Our clients look for us to give them guidance on how to improve DE&I within their organizations. And that is around how do we actually bring slates of diverse candidates to them, and diversity is looked at either as gender or differently enabled. How do we give them recommendations on how to improve hiring in bringing this talent into their organizations? But they also ask us to give them advice around equity. How do we make sure it's a good environment, that there is equity for those individuals? And obviously that translates into inclusion. Because what we don't want to do is bring on board great talent for our clients only to see them exit. So we do a lot of consultation with our clients around how to attract diverse talent. We also provide services in a program managed way for temporary labor. So a client will normally contract with us if they spend 25 million or more, sounds like a lot, doesn't it, on temporary or contract labor. And we work to make sure that we're bringing minority diverse suppliers to be able to help support that organization. So our focus on DE&I is probably threefold. It's consulting with our client organizations to help them improve their outcomes. It's making sure that small minority suppliers are given a voice and have an opportunity to supply temporary or contract labor to those client organizations. It's working within ourselves to look at how can we create roles that somebody who is differently enabled can hold. So I'm quite passionate about looking at a number of roles that I think could be filled and held by differently enabled individuals, particularly in this time of work from home. So there's so many technologies that can help support people who might be blind, who might be deaf, or may have a physical disability. So now is the time, in my view, that we strike. The other thing that we do within Randstad is we have over 100 social innovations, and I'm so passionate about those. There is a particular innovation that we drive, which is called Hire Hope, H-I-R-E Hope. We work with the victims of human trafficking. We have a 26-week program where we teach them new skills. We have partner organizations that help us with that. And we then work with our clients to create jobs for those individuals, to break the pattern of victimization and abuse. And I'm so proud of that. Here in Singapore, we have 3 employees who have come from that particular background. And so being able to create new opportunities for individuals is really important. We have something also called the Global Tent Organization, where our goal is to hire with our clients 3,500 refugees. We look at how we can actually work with Indigenous within different countries to create opportunities for those individuals, either as employees of our client organizations or working within partner suppliers. So there's a lot that we can do. We're super passionate and super engaged with this. Would love to talk with any of you if you would like to meet up, but I will stop now because I can get so passionate and carried away, and I will transition to my next colleague.
Thank you very much, Anthea, for that insight. And of course, coming from the recruiting industry itself, you're seeing far more than what we are seeing in our individual organizations. Now, let me go to Michael. Michael, you're an author, a D&I evangelist. You're sitting out of London right now, if I'm not mistaken, and tell us how the world is seeing Asia. What can we learn from the other case studies that over the course of your research you've done? And of course, your opening remarks. Over to you, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. It's a real privilege to be invited and to join such an illustrious panel. Thank you for it. I guess I'd like to sort of frame my conversation, I suppose, with a personal belief, which is that I believe that almost all organizational culture is flawed. It's true that some organizations are better than others, but if it were not the case that the organizational culture wasn't flawed, then there would be, for instance, no gender pay gap. There would be more female CEOs. Minority ethnic groups would be more represented in the C-suites. There'd be no such things as institutional racism and other workplace discriminations and inequalities. And wider, there'd be no such things as 0 hours contracts. There'd be no plastics in our seas and rivers, no other environmental degradations on a massive scale, etc., etc. So, and further, because if you think about this, all human endeavor is organized, then if you sort out organizational culture, then you can save the world. And I think it's without a doubt the society that is emerging post-pandemic demands, doesn't it, that business itself is kinder, is fairer, is more equal. And it's in that equality where diversity and inclusion plays its part. And then, but that's a sort of macro view, isn't it? But this diversity and inclusion journey, it really starts with yourself. I'm sure most may have heard, well, it's attributed to the Bible, but it's actually a Greek proverb, which is "Physician, heal thyself," and it's a famous proverb, and it sort of asks, doesn't it, that we should each take a look in the mirror, and in context of diversity and inclusivity, are there any personal behaviours or biases, if you like, that negatively affect the potential for your organisation to be more inclusive, more fairer, and more equal? And so the conversation is about culture. What is the sort of culture that you're trying to establish? And if I could also go on from there to a sort of personal anecdote, because an even more personal thing is that the business I ran actually 2 businesses ago, to be honest, I spectacularly fell out with my fellow shareholders in this business that we'd started together. I was the managing director, and what started as minor boardroom disputes over the direction of the enterprise sort of turned into a power struggle, really. And that culminated after 18 months in a very public firework display of, well, what can only be described as red hot emotions on the office floor in front of everybody who worked for us. We could have probably sold front row seats. And this is where I started my journey to being an author, really. But there was no going back from that. So the aftermath threatened the security of the young family I had at the time. It certainly disrupted the culture and the highly valued team we'd put together. It cost us all a small fortune in legal fees. And the business, that business, turned to ashes in the fire that ensued. Now, could we have done things differently? Absolutely, of course we could. Knowing how to, that's a totally different matter. And one of the questions I kept asking myself in the period of reflection that followed is did my partners in the business have a position in their argument that was at least as valid as mine? And it took me a long time to reach any position on this. And now with the benefit of hindsight, I can confirm that yes, they probably did, but I was just ignoring that for lots of different reasons and lots of different prejudices. Now, as it transpires, that is an actual, that's a psychological phenomena. The thing about disagreement is it escalates when you try and sort it out. And research shows that people in dispute typically assume their own motivations are true and just, and the deadlocks that prevent everyone moving forward are likely to be blamed on the other side by both sides, which is mad, isn't it? And that's called attribution bias. So we actively seek out evidence supporting our position in the argument, our worldview, and we ignore the negative opinions of those on the other side of the debate, especially if, and this is really, really revealing, especially if they are in some way, shape or form different to us. Gender is obviously differences, race differences, ideological differences, etc., etc. So that psychological phenomenon known as attribution bias is one way in which our prejudices are reinforced. So that set me off on this personal journey and looking into my own personal biases that stopped me from creating a positive culture. I went on from that business to found as a joint venture with a major media conglomeration called Dentsu, who are based in Tokyo. And we grew that business into, well, 32 markets. And we ended up employing nearly 40,000 people. So diversity inclusivity became a sort of watchword for me, but I had to go on quite a tremendous and fairly epic journey of self-discovery before I was able to get to that position in life. So hopefully we'll get into, there'll be an opportunity to share more about that as we enter the debate, but I just wanted to frame the conversation there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, on that. And like you said, physicians heal thyself, a lot of them. And as Alex said, karate, some absolutely, absolutely indeed. I did see the chat, Alex. So wonderful. So this gives us a lot of thought process, and particularly your experiences, Michael, of setting up businesses and how do you set it up from scratch to have the right foundation rather than doing course correction, rather than having to heal yourself along the way. But unfortunately, there are organizations where we have to heal ourselves along the way as we move on. This brings me to Renee Tan. Renee, such a pleasure to have you with us today. Are you able to unmute yourself, Renee?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, Renee, you've been the, what do I say, the flag bearer of diversity in terms of entrepreneurs, in terms of investors, in terms of the government landscape, and bringing them together with your initiatives with Her Entrepreneur. And you've done it across Asia. Share with us your thoughts, and how do you see, especially the perceptive part, Renee, which I think that's where we call the elephant in the room, right? I mean, a lot of times we've seen organizations saying of different levels that, is it a tick in the box or is it genuinely coming along? How are you marrying the perception and the reality on ground? Over to you, Renee.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to join this panel with fellow esteemed speakers. Hi, my name is Renee. I'm the MD of Hashtags. We're based in Singapore and Malaysia. And what we do as a company is we uplift businesses in brand transformation and omni-channel marketing. And we've also formed an ecosystem of industry leaders and entrepreneurs in innovation and technology And you mentioned about HER Entrepreneur, where I'm also a founder. What we do here is that we have formed an omni-channel media platform and also a community of entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, government, and investors across Asia through our programs, where we ensure that there's diversity in our speakers' profile and in the community. And when people ask, then why the term HER? So HER means harnessing the power of women in entrepreneurship, leadership, and relationship. So they ask me, and usually, they'll say, is this something meant for women only? And I'll say no. And I ensure that in our program, there are male speakers, there are people of various gender, culture, background, various industries to share their, of course, business ideas, their strategies, growth strategies with the audience. And the purpose is to inspire more female founders in Asia and provide them with the opportunity to learn, connect, and grow beyond their comfort zone and dream bigger. As we all know, in Asia, especially in Singapore, about 30% of the businesses are owned by women. So we need to groom future leaders of various background, right? So the future, how's it going to be? To me, the mindset of diversity and inclusion stems from childhood. I feel it's about, sometimes it's really about the biasness formed can be based on a few things, and one of them could be the subliminal messages in various touch points, such as advertisements in schools, through the parents. All of these can impact a child's mentality and openness to, and that can impact them when they grow and when they start to be out in the workforce, right? So we all know about the term diversity in the workplace. It's commonly, used as a term, but what it entails is to millennials, right? It's important that we embrace, the providing that equal opportunity for everyone, and so that the company is able to progress much better. And that also brings me to my next point on cognitive diversity. So cognitive diversity means including people with different thought processes, patterns, ideas, problem-solving perspectives. And this means hiring, instead of hiring for a culture fit, the new wave could be hiring for a culture add. How can one add value to the organization, right? How can one's past education, schooling experiences, their background can bring value to the organization, and what can we as an organization learn from these individuals? I think this is an important point, cognitive diversity in the workplace, that we could possibly implement in the workforce. As we know that in time to come, right, there's a survey that was conducted that by 2025, quite a big percentage of the workforce, at least, the millennials, right, will make up about 75% of the workforce by 2025. So we have to make sure that the new generation are groomed in the correct way. Yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
Fantastic, Renee. And cognitive diversity, absolutely. And I think, as you rightly talked about, it starts right at the bottom of your, or I would say the start of your journey as an individual, and how you imbibe it in a personal as well as professional thought process. Fantastic point. Now, as we say that, for those of us who weren't born, like I'm pretty old, so who were not born in the age where D&I was a word that we would talk of, there is a journey that organizations will have to take, and of course, which will entail a lot of rewards, motivation, and more to imbibe that culture in organization. That is where I bring in Alex. Alex, a very warm welcome. You've been a consultant on human capital solutions for nearly 2 decades, having worked across the HR spectrum and people spectrum. Share with us your thoughts on how we can motivate and imbibe D&I as a hygiene activity and a hygiene thought process in organizations today.
Thank you very much for that, Deepshikha. And again, such a pleasure to be on this panel. You're making me feel young because as my gray hair may show, it's been well over 2 decades that I've been doing this. But maybe first a quick introduction. Alex will do for the Russian speakers who are paying attention out there. The full name is Alexander Sergeyevich Krasavin, but that's perhaps a little bit of a mouthful.
Alex.
Yes, let's stick with Alex. I've now based in Singapore. I've called it home for the last 10 years, which has been amazing for those who are calling in from here. I work at Aon, and at Aon, we're in the business of better decisions. Specifically, when it comes to the topic at hand, we're in the business of helping clients make better workforce decisions. So with that perspective, and I'm glad for your question, Deepshikha, it's really about, from our point of view, about data, about making sure that you look at not just what feels right, but you back that up with statistics, with information, with a plethora of data that's becoming more and more available, because frankly, that is the common language. That is the lingua franca that executives speak, no matter their cultural background, no matter their organizational size. Numbers matter. So from that perspective, maybe just to share as a baseline, what we do at Aon is we collect about 50 million records on compensation of people around the world, many different companies, and we help conduct about 30 million assessments annually. As I'm sure everybody can appreciate, that gives us a tremendous set of data that we can analyze, specifically when it comes to such important issues that were raised already, such as, well, pay equity and disparity, how we approach bringing people into the organization, and how we maintain and motivate them throughout. So let me maybe pivot a little bit and speak to some of this data that perhaps would be of interest to both the fellow panelists as well as to our audience. First, there is real value, empirical value in D&I initiatives. Studies found that that companies with more than 30% of women were more likely to outperform companies with fewer women executives, or not at all. That hopefully is not a surprise, and I'm glad to see the diversity in both the panel as well as the awardees, but that is a simple fact of the matter, and just shows to how data is catching up to what we probably knew all along. Uniformity compared to diversity really breeds fantastic outcomes. Likewise, and this is a little bit data, this is pre-COVID 2019, top quartile companies in terms of ethnic and cultural diversity outperform those in the bottom quartile by 36% in profitability. We're not talking about single digits, we're talking significant performance improvement to those who are more diverse. Now, why? I think we can all kind of internalize and think through the ramifications of what it's like to have people who have a different perspective. Renee, I love the term cognitive diversity because I think that is particularly applicable in our part of the world where we have such great diversity of culture, language, religion, gender background coming together, yet we all come from slightly different points of view. And that is the strength of where you as an organization mirror your customers. That I think is one of the more important kind of fundamental, if you will, executive speak conversations. But besides, and I think forgetting empirical, or rather putting it on one side, the most important thing, it is the right thing to do, just simply put. And I love the reference, Sonam, you mentioned about inclusivity in the keynote speech of being invited to dance. Who does not like dancing, right? Life is too short not to do the right thing, right? Life is too short not to make sure that we all contribute and we enjoy and take advantage of all that life has to offer. So maybe in closing, let me go through a little bit of what we hear from our clients, pivoting back to that conversation on how to use data-driven approaches to developing D&I programs. I'd say there are 5 key steps. First and foremost is to look at data, right? That's probably not a surprise, but combine both internal and external data. You have to audit your organization's programs and policies. Number 2 is to supplement that, right? Looking at external and internal data is one thing. Talking, big surprise, talking to your people, understanding what is important and looking beyond, for those familiar with analogy, beyond the top of the iceberg, beneath the waterline is so essential to get to the fact, to the root of the matter. Doing that through interviews, engagement surveys. Number 3 is to identify, of course, the right diversity metrics. What gets measured gets done. That's the fact, and do so throughout the employee lifecycle. Number 4 is to establish a go-forward strategy, right? That should be done and driven from an enterprise, and no matter how big your enterprise is, but from a top-down level. And number 5 is, of course, set up a monitoring system. So these establishment of right KPIs and periodically adjusting them as the situation changes is what, when we speak with our clients, have been found as some of the core steps required. And then, of course, certain projects such as pay gap calculations, such as making sure that there's appropriate dashboards. And then, of course, pivoting to the big topic, which is ESG. And as we look at the broadness of all ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance, D&I is such a cornerstone to the new way that we're looking at the world. I would challenge, I would say that perhaps we don't need to wait until 2025. Much has been written about the Great Resignation. We are a lot closer to the point where employees should be quite cognizant of all that's available to them. And given the war for talent that is very, very active, absolutely, why should they join a company that doesn't support that? So that I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you very much, Alex. Absolutely. I mean, with the world changing, with circumstances changing, we need to be more receptive to what the talent market has to offer and where talents lie in different pools of diversity. That brings me to one of the topmost thought leaders that I have met in this part of the world, Sudakshina Bhattacharya. She is a seasoned leader and one of the strongest harbingers of D&I and furthering the cause of not just the gender gap, but other parts of diversity and inclusion as well. Let me call upon Sudakshina to please share your thoughts and an opening remark.
Hi, Deepshikha. Thank you so much for having me here. And what a privilege and pleasure to be amongst the esteemed panelists. And lovely to have been hearing all of you speak about your, top thoughts on D&I. The way I would want to, share my opening comments is the fact that we are having a conversation where, people from across the world have joined in a forum to discuss about what is the current scenario in D&I and where does the world go in D&I. In organizations, of course, it is a journey. And I remember you mentioned that, way back then, maybe a couple of decades ago, there was no conversation about D&I. But now there is a conscious awareness. There are choices that organizations are making. There are choices that the candidates are making, because most of the workforce is of millennials. I think I was reading somewhere that 70% of the workforce in the next few years is going to be millennials. And today, and especially in the last 2 years, with the way the world has been, I think a lot of individuals have pivoted priorities of their lives very differently from what it had been for so many years. And that kind of, that's a huge element, especially for organizations, to create that kind of a climate or that kind of an ecosystem where candidates who make a choice to choose an organization where diversity is a fundamental requirement, that ecosystem is present. It's not only towards getting to a certain number or getting to a certain target or to be compliant to governance norms, sustainability norms and stuff like that. Those are important. What is more important than that is to create that ecosystem where people can bring in the transformation in mind. Diversity is about being open, creating space for different kind of people, for thoughts, skills, ethnicity, color, all of that. So it is a transformation that that people need to bring in, and the organization need to create that kind of an ecosystem and allow that transformation to manifest in the organization through initiative, practices, targets, goals, etc., etc. I mean, at HDFC Orgo, it's been a journey for us, and we started with gender and then we added abilities. But what is more important is that there's a commitment from right at the top to make this a priority in the organization. It's not just a tick in the box HR agenda. And I'm so grateful to Suman for having shared that this cannot be a human resources agenda to drive D&I culture in the organization. So fortunately, we have leaders in the organization who have personal commitments towards how it is going, and more organizations are really doing it. I was reading a very interesting article, and I'm going to just take another minute to quote that, where I read that an organization, a really large organization in India, has created an initiative where they're welcoming homemakers to come and make a second career or first career within the organization. I think that's a tremendous step towards inclusivity. And they say that who says that the experience that the homemakers have had is not an experience that can't be relevant to the organization? I think these are really initiatives, or these are really thoughts that are challenging the unconscious, sometimes unspoken biases. And I think each one of us here and the larger ecosystem that works is somewhere contributing to build those blocks, or they are like the building blocks, which eventually creates a world which is far more inclusive and far more respectful to people of different skills and thoughts and ethnicities and diversity and whatever may be the word. And it doesn't end just by organization. I think there is a movement, and rightfully so. And we can see a lot of that happening in Asia as well, that it's transcending beyond just organizations and corporates. So more about that as we go along with the discussions. But this is what I want to say, that I'm so pleased to personally see that so many people have actually invested the time and resources to talk about D&I, and that is huge.
Thank you very much, Sudakshana. May I just request one small comment from you, or share your experience in that, Sudakshana? You've started this beautiful concept called sharing circles in your organization, and which talks about diversity at multiple levels, right? I mean, gender, of course, is one, and then there is ability. Age is a big metric of diversity also, which is shaping up now. Please share with us what's been your experience on sharing circles. What was your vision, and where do you want to take this concept?
Thank you, Deepshikha, for asking that. I think psychological safety at work has not been as important as it is now. And there are people who are really, people like to express, and organizations need to create that kind of platforms where people can express. It's beyond just expressing about what's going on at work, but what's going on in the larger scheme of life. What are things that are shifting? Where are people moving in their own minds and hearts and stuff like that? So we wanted to create a platform like that where people could come and converse without feeling unsafe, converse with safety. Share, we come across that we're not alone. There are multiple people who are going through similar kind of experiences, challenges, struggles. So that's how Sharing Circle was really born. And of course, thanks to you, Deepshikha, that we collaborated with SpeakIn to bring Sharing Circle to life. And what is happening today is obviously one of the core offerings of Sharing Circle. But we intend to take this beyond just a one-way conversation, but we want to take this beyond this and make it into a dialogue, make it into more frequent dialogues on different topics where people can actually come in and share without feeling unsafe. So that's really about Sharing Circles. And I'm so glad that Sharing Circles in the last few months has made it here. Thanks to the entire team which has helped us to get here.
Thank you very much, Sudakshana. That talks volumes about your vision. And of course, a lot of organizations can take inspiration from what you're creating at home. with sharing circles. Thank you very much for that. And now, as we talked about, from karate ipsum to cognitive diversity, and of course, healing the organizations or our cultures or our systems as we go along. Now, this is where I bring in a wonderful gentleman who is also the managing director of Twitter in SEA, Arvind Gujral, and very dearly people address him as Arvi. Arvi, you work with startups, you work with entrepreneurs, you work with new age businesses. How are you seeing the landscape of the new organizational systems changing? I mean, in our organization at SpeakIn, 65% of people are women. So we're lopsided. I mean, we heard from the other side, can we get some diversity, please? So what are you seeing in terms of caste, creed, age, gender, and more in new age organizations, your experiences and the opening thoughts, Alvi?
Thanks, Deepshikha, and lovely and honored to be with all of you today. So I'm the ex-managing director of Twitter, SEA, so I'm probably the only unemployed person on the panel, which also means that I will bring a very neutral perspective to everything I say today. But I've spent over 2 decades. I've worked in the Silicon Valley, I've worked in India, and now live and work in Singapore. And I think if you can look at the way I look, I'm wearing a turban on my head. Diversity really and inclusion is something very close to my heart, because when you live and work in many countries and different continents, it hits you home the minute you step on a plane and you go outside your native country. And that takes me to the point of why are we even having this conversation, right? I can tell you in the last 3 years, I have been on a panel on D&I every quarter without exception. But before that, there was not even a question, there was not even a comment on D&I, even within the companies I worked at or any other companies outside of that. And the fact that we're having this conversation today is not that it's a check in the box and it's an HR, as somebody said before, it's an HR issue. It is not an HR issue. If the people attending this event today are mostly from HR, then those organizations have failed, because it is not HR's OKR to take ownership of D&I conversations. They may be thought starters, but if business leaders in the companies are not attending D&I conversations where they don't have to speak, if you're only attending a D&I event where you are invited to speak, then I think you have not really bought into the concept of D&I. And I say that only because for me, I'm a business operator. For me, it all comes down to how are we doing as a company. And if you cannot connect a D&I conversation to eventual business outcomes, it always remains an amorphous concept of what actually D&I means for the organization. And I'll exemplify this with a couple of examples. Imagine early in the 30, 40, 50 years ago, when there was a team creating crash test dummies for airbags, right? Probably it was a room full of men who created a crash test dummy, but not a single woman there, because they did not think of what an airbag crash test dummy would actually impact a woman versus a man. Now, I don't have to go all the way back. Think of when Google, Twitter, and all other tech companies are doing image recognition software. Today, and this was a big topic on Twitter, on Google, about Facebook and Instagram, the images uploaded automatically would favor somebody who has a whiter complexion than someone who has a darker complexion, right? It was inherently built into the algorithm. It would optimize that image more. Now, where did this cognitive bias come from? I will probably go back and say maybe it was a room full of white men who wrote the first algorithm in the software. Those biases have now eventually been removed and acknowledged, and the algorithms are getting better to do a better representation of the audience that is using those platforms. Because you have 2 billion people on Facebook, not all are white. So you have to have a better, more neutral. And so if you now can connect that product that you actually sell to the market to the cognitive bias that may arise from a lack of diversity and inclusion in the conversation, in the teams itself, right? Then you can see how it actually impacts business results. And if you're not connecting that to the OKR, and you're only saying, I held so many D&I conversations in the company, or I did a training, I've done a few of these where I have attended unconscious bias training, and my team has attended unconscious bias training. So, HR said, okay, we did one in the year and we're done with it. You cannot remove years of unconscious bias by one training. It is just not possible. And it has to be a conversation that is repeated over and over and over again till it becomes aware in your mind that I'm consciously, I know I'm biased, right? And where does it strike most? When you're actually hiring somebody, right? You see a resume and you see the name on the resume and you see the school you've gone to, and you say, I'll take a Harvard person over this random public college somewhere in another part of the world. That also is a bias, right? I have worked at global companies. A bias that very few companies acknowledge is geographical bias, right? So if you're a company headquartered in a certain country, let's say America, those who work outside the US feel a bias against themselves. Like, I'm not in HQ and we don't get the same things that those working in HQ get. Now the HQ you can shift it to Tokyo. If you're a Japanese company headquartered in Tokyo, those who work for a Japanese company outside Tokyo will have a different feeling, right? Biases come in many shape and form, and connecting that to the organization's OKR, if it is not connected, you can do all the trainings, it will not move the needle. And finally, Deepshikha, you asked me about startups. So, what have I been doing since I've been unemployed? I'm sitting on a few boards. I've invested in a few startups and mentoring them. So the question here is, if you're you have 100,000 employees, you're Google, yes, let's talk D&I, right? Those needles will move very slowly, but surely. And it takes time for, over 2 decades of something to be done right. You're a startup. You only have 10 or 20 people in your company. You have $1 million in the bank. Do you think they are talking D&I? I tell you they're not. It's not even a conversation starter. If today, Deepshikha, you say, I'm going to talk about D&I, the founder will say, I don't have the time. I'm trying to survive right now, right? So when is the right time to talk D&I? The question is, the startup founder has come from somewhere. They don't just come out of thin air. So they have worked at some other organization in the past. If you can carry the DNA of always on diversity and inclusion, then it doesn't need to be a topic to have a conversation starter. It is something you will do from day one of the company you found. But if you have come in from a company where it's a singular culture, and somebody alluded to cultural fit, I vehemently detest that word. And I remember 8 years at Twitter, every interview I was asked, is this person a cultural fit? And after 8 years, and I made the mistake of hiring for cultural fit. And now why I vehemently detest that word is every time you ask for only a cultural fit, you're excluding people who are not what you call cultural fit. Then where is diversity of opinion? Because if everybody has to look and forget about looks, if everybody has to have the same thought process in the company, which is defined as cultural fit, you have no diversity of opinion. And the whole point of D&I is to have diversity of opinion, not color. Color is a first order metric. Gender is a first order metric. These are first order metrics. The second order metric is why do you want these people? Because you want people to come in and have diversity of opinion. Only then can you acknowledge and recognize that it actually doesn't matter that you're white, brown, you are gender neutral, or which background you come from, socioeconomic. Your thought is what matters to me, not anything else. But because we are not there yet, we have to look at the first order metrics about other more visible forms of inclusion and diversity.
Absolutely. I think Arith is the best, I think it's the best way that I've ever heard of the challenges of D&I. But I think the flip side to that is also in coming from this culture, and you're absolutely right. I think a startup founder is not thinking color, caste, creed, or age. It's only thinking performance, meritocracy, and will the person contribute to the organization getting to the next level. So thank you very much for giving that perspective, Arith. At this time, may I also bring in my next question, which again, now we talk about, the nuances of execution and delivery, as I say, of D&I initiatives. So my first question goes to Anthea. Anthea, how do you get an entire company, importantly the leadership team, on board with D&I initiatives? You're trying to move a mountain. How do you do it?
You absolutely are. You're trying to turn the Titanic in a very short space of time. And what we see across the organizations that we support is that senior leadership understands the goal, understands the why. But there's a disconnect with the middle management and lower management. And their focus is simply hiring somebody who can do the job and do it as fast as possible, because they're normally under pain. They've had a resignation. They need to backfill. They need to be able to deliver against their objectives. So what we see happen is that middle or lower level manager wants to hire someone that looks just like them, that comes from the same educational background, the same work experience. So a little like Avi was saying there's not a willingness to take longer time frame or a willingness to onboard somebody who perhaps doesn't have exactly the 100% skill set. So that means that there's a disconnect between the goals of the senior leadership team, who are often bonused. We're seeing that they are bonused against D&I objectives. And then the hiring managers who are not bonused, and they're only concerned about getting the job done as fast as possible. And so we see the impact of unconscious bias. And we see the impact that in our part of the world and what we do, we are measured on speed to hire, so time to fill. And if you're bringing in minority candidates who may not be as qualified in terms of experience as the first group of candidates, that time to hire metric cannot be applied in the same way. So there's another disconnect in terms of understanding that you have to actually relax some of your normal metrics in order to allow an environment in which you can onboard somebody who may have 70% of the skill, but has 100% of the attitude, but comes from a background where they may not have had that exposure. And I think it's particularly true in the technology world. So I think what's important is that when the organization establishes their D&I objectives, they need to cascade those objectives throughout the organization, and they need to use a lever such as bonus to be able to reinforce that. But equally, they need to look at what are their expectations of the individuals, the expectations of the hiring managers. Are they going to give some kind of a relaxation against the objectives that they have to deliver in order for them to be able to bring on board somebody who may not have that standard background? That means that they fit 100% of the requisition. So I think there's multiple pieces, and we need to look at reward and recognition in order to be able to turn that Titanic.
Fantastic. Rewards and recognition. So now that's where the opportunities lie, and that's where we are turning. But in terms of challenges, Alex, you've seen multiple organizations, right? I mean, you've seen many, many such situations. What do you think are an organization's genuine, on-ground, actionable challenges which they need to address to get to a truly D&I-oriented ecosystem?
So I think brilliant question. I appreciate that, because at the end of the day, what really matters, and this is where I will paraphrase Arvi's comment, is survival, right? Startups are in a bit of a unique situation, especially before you get to stage A, right? It is literally a matter of survival. How do you make sure that your great idea gets to the next stage and getting the funding? But I would argue that as you go along that process, as you get to further stages, get additional funding, perhaps look out towards going public, that's where D&I really becomes a key factor, right? I briefly alluded to ESG beforehand, and I think it is truly fundamental, right? And we all know that the sooner you implement the right policies, the sooner you implement the infrastructure, the easier it will be to manage things, right? Now, on the other hand, exactly the same thing applies to large organizations. Like it or not, for those that are public, there's this mentality of quarterly earning calls where executives are held to perhaps unnecessary high expectations of delivering financial results. And when it comes to delivering financial results, you know, it's about simple dollar signs. And that's precisely why my comments previously about data. Now, what is, again, I go back to ESG because I truly believe we are churning how the relationship between employees and employers, that social contract is evolving to something that's a little bit bigger than our organization, something that is contributing to societies. This is, again, why I see ESG as a fantastic overarching umbrella. Maybe to address also Antia's comments about talent acquisition, which I think fundamentally is at the root of obviously how we bring people into the organization. I wonder how many of those who are listening have read Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers. It's a brilliant book, a couple years old, but in essence, the punchline is individuals, human beings are not good at understanding what those they don't know about actually think, right? And this is exactly where technology comes in as a great solution, right? Running through automatic assessment systems. I'm sure all of you have heard of these examples when you take out the name from a CV and just screen it based on merit, or you listen to a violin player with the curtains closed. The decisions are very different. And that, I think, is something that we should embrace. How we can couple technology with an overarching ESG mission.
Fantastic. I mean, ESG is a conversation that we are having a full-blown activity in the next 2 months. So yes, it'll be a continuation of this conversation, Alex, as you beautifully put. Now, let me come to Michael now. And Michael, very clearly, and like Alex talked about data has shown multiple times that D&I is not just a concept, it has a very tangible impact on an organization's bottom line. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you see the implications, and how can organizations take advantage of D&I, a larger diverse pool of employees, to get a better return?
Oh, could you just clarify further on? So, because we've spoken earlier about the acres of research that exists, that more inclusive, more diverse companies are more profitable. So the evidence is really stacks up there. It's in fact undeniable. I wanted to touch on the stuff around sort of the question I got was about managing diversity or managing for it.
Sure, let's hear it. Sure.
Sorry, and that notion of managing diversity is, I guess, it might be slightly the wrong term to use, because we need I think the more correct phrase is probably about how do we build a culture in which inclusivity and equality is intrinsic and instinctive. And going back to my early comments about building a kinder, fairer, more equal business culture. And it's that word, isn't it, culture? And I was interested in Arvi's thoughts as well about how he hates that word culture, cultural fit. And obviously the definition of culture, all of us, it doesn't differ, does it, from any other commentators? It's the way in which people within an enterprise collectively act to achieve a vision. Mm. And I would argue that it will take a sort of wholesale reimagining of the organizational structure, particularly the hierarchical nature of our organizations, because so we need to rip up and rewrite our values frameworks as the starting point. It's okay if you're a startup and you've already got a vision, an inclusive vision, you build that from the ground up. But what if you're a well-established major blue chip and you need to turn your oil tank around? And I think it starts with a major rewriting of the values framework, because if you think about it, in a business context where inclusivity is urgent and demanded, is it the right thing to expect all of our people to conform to a very narrow set of corporate values? If you think about your average corporate values framework, that's only 4 qualities. Thinking about that is hardly conducive to diversity. So and one of the I'm not an HR person, and it far be it for me to be critical of any HR processes, but one of the ways of beginning, the accepted ways of beginning to establish good culture is in your recruitment policy. And are those recruits a good cultural fit? And then sort of underlining what Arvi said. So I think it would be more valuable to get people to out their own personal values framework. So I embarked on an exercise where I took everybody's CVs, ripped them up, and I said, I'd like you to rewrite your CV, but give it under 4 headings. And those 4 headings are the the personal values that you ascribe to, and then put all your achievements and how they've underpinned those particular personal values. And in that way, I was able to identify people who could get a better idea, because you can never really fully identify what a person's like until you get them in the building, but is able to identify whether they were a closer fit to a more inclusive and more accepting of a diverse organisation. And so I thought that was interesting, and I working across markets, I just from personal experience, and going back to the bottom line question, is that so we had 32 markets, 32 different offices, and there were some of those offices were acquisitions. So we bought established agencies, and some of those established agencies, as we got deeper into them, had flawed cultures, very lack of diversity, and without exception, those agencies who had lack of diversity were less profitable than other outposts of our organizations in different markets.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Michael, for that. So let me just now at this point of time go to Renee, and before I come to Ari, we've suddenly started getting a flurry of questions for you from the audiences. Renee, before I go to Arvi, you have seen, of course, I mean, like Arvi, you've seen the entrepreneurs, you've seen the new age millennials coming into work. Do you think that millennials today are looking for diversity and inclusion in the workplace? And is it true that the millennials care more about D&I, or is it a trend that you're seeing only in Asia or in other parts of the world as well?
Okay. I think the millennials of today, when they look for a job, they may not purposefully look for diversity and inclusion first as the first list, right? First thing in the list. They probably may choose the workplace based on other preferences. Maybe it's a job fit, maybe because they are inspired by the leaders in the organization, or it's based on their previous, of course, their degrees, master degrees and whatnot, right? So most of them, that could be more of a top of mind, right? Rather than diversity and inclusion. However, millennials might enjoy having an inclusive and diverse team to work with, right? Due to the dynamism in, say, for example, brainstorming sessions, learning from people of various perspectives, the cross-cultural exchanges with colleagues from different countries and background, the opportunity to travel. That is one incentive that one of the incentives that millennials might be attracted to, the opportunity to travel. And thus, as a result, they interact with colleagues in other countries as well. They start to go to conferences and be in platforms like this, right? And with that, they probably have realized the benefits of inclusion and diversity in the workplace, which has, proven to show that that brings in good results in the organization in terms of innovation, because of the dynamic sharing from the team, and also improvement in terms of sales, because as we go through globalization, right, companies are growing really quickly, and they can be opening up everywhere. So the sales team will have to be diverse as well in terms of their background in order to connect with the local or foreign, right, prospects, or even the customers. So all of these things will make them more conscious about inclusion and diversity, and therefore because they see the benefit and they would appreciate it. But in the first instance, I don't think they purposefully look for a company based on this criteria. Yeah, so that's my thought. Yeah.
I think maybe in this time and age, diversity is a hygiene. Millennials assume that we're all equals. Maybe like you talked about the
Yes,
cognitive
that's right.
diversity.
I think it's also about generational progression,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, the new parents are grooming the next generation, and the new age parents are also more exposed, right? And therefore, the millennials, the newer generation, the Gen Z, would be more open to such kind of inclusion and diversity. Yeah.
Well, the leaders might even say that even the hierarchical diversity is fading away with millennials coming in and the organizations themselves becoming more and more flat. Ari, that brings me to you to share your thoughts. Two questions. One is that you have seen Asia very, very closely. Of course, you worked in the Silicon Valley and come and home and then here in Singapore. What is your view of how have you seen this the D&I concept progressing in Asia? And the number two question that I have, or let me ask you this question first, and then I'll come back to you for the second question.
Go ahead and answer the second question. Let me answer both together.
So we have a question, in fact, from the audiences, and it could be a mix of, maybe with what people have seen in the recent past. Marvelous sharing, as they say, and they said that migrants are always expected to be in lower management. There are many cultural challenges when it comes to senior management positions, when it comes to you changing locations and working out of your native lands. Is this considered to be or categorized as an unconscious bias?
All right, great question. Actually, it's a very, very good question. So let me answer both. Let me start with Asia and then talk about people who migrate from the home country and work somewhere else. So, if you look at Asia Pacific, right, I'm sure if you Google, you will find some analyst report talking about diversity and inclusion in Asia has progressed from A to I. I'm sure there'll be like 20 research reports coming out. So that's what consultants do. They need to make a living as well. So I don't actually read too much into reports because, I read a quote somewhere. If you torture data long enough, it'll tell whatever story you want to tell, right? So if the consultant wants to sell a report, they will make a nice headline. But irrespective of what the report says, I think the trend lines are very clear. Yes, D&I is a conversation. D&I, and because let's be a little cynical and say because there's just so much conversation about D&I, even the unwilling participant now has to be a participant, right? So there is peer pressure, public pressure, even if you're doing fake posturing, at least it's driving something on a positive side, right? So I would say the trend lines are clear. We are better off today than we were, say, 10 years ago on where we are in the concept of D&I, where the organizations are evolving and becoming more inclusive, not just more diversification. But I spoke about data only because, I'll highlight 2 points, how data can be constructed, right? I'm sure all of us, and I worked at various companies where we said, oh, our gender diversity has improved from X% to Y%, right? I always believe you have to, I said in the previous conversation statement as well, you always have to double click on numbers. Why? Because let's say you say, my company has increased women participation, women diversity from 10% to 20%, right? Click on it and say, where has it increased? If you find all of them clustered in, say, HR or in another function, then you really have not diversified. You may have got a better representation of women. You have not got diversity, right? So people confuse representation and diversity with headline numbers. And I think that's a trap we need to be careful about falling on, because headlines can be misleading. They are good headlines, they make a wonderful tweet, but it may not be true. So if you ask an average employee, they're like, I'm still surrounded by all men. So, HR has all the women, right? So that's again, representation. Now, but that's when you intake people. So are you increasing the representation / or are you actually doing diversity? Now let's see about people who are in the company, right? What about them? You can't always talk about recruitment as the only funnel of doing a D&I role at the company. So when you're doing assessment of people, you're a half yearly or the annual assessment, and this is again through research report. And I said research reports you need to take a pinch of salt, but this one speaks to me, right? I used to lead a team in SCA. It was mostly over 50% were women. Now, and I got to learn to manage them, because managing a team of diverse people from across different backgrounds in Asia Pacific and different gender also it takes time, and it takes art. Nobody can say I can manage a team if it's diverse. It also, as a manager, you have to spend time to understand how to manage it. And I would see this consistently when we would ask the women to do a self-assessment of how they think they did. They would score themselves less on an average than men. Men would come up with a little more confidence about how much they think they have done. And when a manager actually looks at a report, because the benchmarking that women have done for themselves is lower, the manager would then rate them lower as well. And this, again, multiple third parties have shown. So taking insight on how do you change the process so that the data does not mislead into an action. Action has to take care of the data, right? So the simple action some organizations have taken is let the manager and the individual contributor rate at the same time, so you're not consciously biasing one another on what you think you have rated, right? So if you rate at the same time and then see where the scores are too far apart or too near, and then you have a meeting of the minds. So hence, for me, has Asia Pacific done better or worse? I think it's in a better place than it was in the past. The second question on migrants. Now, this is a topic close to my heart. Most of us are economic migrants. Most of us, there are Alex is from another country living in Singapore. Most of the people who live in Singapore on this panel are economic migrants, right? Are you better off or worse off in your home country? I think the world has changed substantially, right? If you look at me, I'm not. I don't look in the same as everyone. I've worked for 7 years in the Valley. Yes, did I feel that when I was there that there were opportunities that were not available to me because I was a migrant? Absolutely yes. There are multiple kinds of biases you will face when you're a migrant. There is the subconscious bias of race, gender, location. The simple fact that when I worked in the US and when all my colleagues get together or my manager would get together who was an American, they would talk about college football, right? When we used to go out for drinks or, and I could not participate. It's impossible for me as an Indian who has never studied in the US to understand what conversations they're having. Is that a conscious exclusion? Not necessarily. But do you feel excluded? Absolutely. So when you're an economic migrant, you do have to put in the extra yard. And this is the hard reality. You will not be included by automatically no matter where you go. And I think there are different parts of the world where you feel it less or worse. You go to Japan, you will feel it even more difficult to integrate into that society than you would say in the US. Singapore is a beautiful melting pot. And I think that's why lots of us are sitting here in Singapore, because they have created the structure that you feel included from the get-go. Right? Even Singapore has many other biases that we need to take on. I'm not going to go there right now. It's not the topic of discussion. But I will absolutely concede to the point that if you're a migrant, you are half a step behind in some cases, but there are many success stories where you have economic migrants who have done extremely well, leading global organizations in the US, in Japan, of different nationalities. So those are the examples to get inspired by.
Fantastic. And I think the key to diversity is, and being a woman, I can say that, are we also alluding to your point? I think it's a 50-50 battle. I mean, if you assume and you walk into a conversation thinking that you are a woman, you're a migrant, you are old, you're of color, you've lost that battle in your demeanor. That battle, once you win, I think the other half can be managed by your performance and your meritocracy. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, such a wonderful and beautiful panel. I learned a lot. And at this point, I would like to call back Mimi and thank Michael Brown, Alex, I'm not going to take the full name, Anthea Collier, Arvinder Gujral, Renee Tan, and our beautiful Sudakshana, and of course, Mr. Sonam Sarkar, who gave us a wonderful, wonderful start to the event. Thank you very much for being here with us. Mimi, over to you. Let's start on the journey to recognizing the men and women who have taken the baton forward on diversity.
Thank you, Deepshikha. What a phenomenal hour that was. And I was taking notes furiously all across social media as well. Some really phenomenal insights. I think, Deepshikha, if it's okay with you, you are going to introduce sort of the role and background of the awards, and then we're going to go into the actual ceremony.
Thank you very much, Mimi. Yes, I would love to do that. And as I open by starting the conversation on, what DNI stands for, SpeakIn, it's a topic which is very close to my heart. It's a topic which we live and breathe, even though in a startup culture. At SpeakIn, a truly inclusive organization. This is a central part of the event. We are honoring today Asia's topmost DNI champions. The recognition is for excellence in the thought leadership and for furthering the cause of diversity and inclusivity. These individuals being commended have been the beacons working towards embedding the overarching principle of unity in diversity in the culture of organizations and in illuminating the DNI movement. Their efforts show how diversity fuels competitiveness and how best to lead a diverse workforce and create a culture of inclusion. And I'm sure each one of the gentlemen and the ladies who are to come now onwards will take massive pride in the panel that spoke of before us. I think we've created a competition of sorts within the conversation today, where such illuminating experts came, talked about DNI, and now we move to the felicitation. So thank you, Mimi. Thank you, everybody, for giving SpeakIn an opportunity to take this conversation and the topic forward. Mimi, back to you.
Wonderful. There we go. You've had a sneak peek of everyone who is up for the awards today. And I'm going to hand over to Sanjeev, who's going to kick us off with the first awardee for today.
Yes, thank you, Mimi. So 10 DNI champions, starting first with Alisha Fernando. She's to go, so we'll go to Alisha first. Mimi.
Wonderful. So Alisha Fernando, for her strategy development and program delivery for disadvantaged and underrepresented groups within society. Here is Alisha to talk about what this award means. Perhaps we have lost Alisha, Sanjeev.
Oops. Okay. So Sophie Guerin, she's our first awardee then.
Wonderful. Sophie, congratulations for being the voice of sagacity for diversity and inclusion and for social and communal interdependence across Asia. Here is Sophie to talk about the award.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful recognition. It's really a pleasure to join this illustrious group today, and I've really enjoyed hearing the conversation. I just want to say thank you for actually sending it in the mail. I can't believe the last time I got actually something like that in the mail. So it was wonderful. It was a delight. I just want to say it's amazing how this conversation has evolved over the last, 2 decades here in Asia Pacific in particular. And I see colleagues in the meeting today who I've long had the opportunity to collaborate and learn from in this space of diversity and inclusion. I think Asia is such an exciting place to drive diversity and inclusion, particularly because it's constantly evolving and learning. But I also think that the rest of the world has a lot to learn from Asia. And I think Singapore in particular is a great example of learning how to drive diversity and inclusion in a way that's relevant and meaningful for the communities here in Singapore. It's really, I think, as a D&I professional, our responsibility to continue to educate and build the capacity for the next generation of DE&I talent, particularly those here in the region advocating for issues that are relevant for the communities in which they live in. And so that's something I'm really proud to be able to do as a DE&I leader. And I really appreciate the recognition in terms of promoting the values of diversity and inclusion here in Asia Pacific. So thank you so much for the recognition. Honored to be here.
Wonderful. Sanjeev, on to our next award. Sanjeev, are you there?
Sorry, I was on mute. Next, we go to Nandini Sarkar, Mimi.
Wonderful. Nandita, congratulations on your award for ensuring that your organizations have a mix of talent with equal opportunity in a truly inclusive environment in every way. We would love to hear from you about the award, and congratulations again.
Thank you so much. And here it is. I'm so thrilled and overjoyed to be recognized amidst illustrious group of people here. A warm hello from Bangalore, the capital city of the princely state of Karnataka in India. I'm joined in from my home office and I go by the pronoun she, her. I sit on the land of Adian, Gond, Bamcha, Kamara, Solidus, to name a few, and I bow in respect for all the indigenous people of the land, past, present, and future. For accessibility's sake, I'm a Gen Xer with a long black hair, use glasses, wearing a black top teamed with a light gray shrug. This is a story of a girl, and I'm really, really touched from an individual core of my heart. So here's a story from a girl born to migrant parents who grew up at the foothills of Kanchenjunga, a mountain in the Himalayan range, surrounded by nature and tea gardens amidst tribal communities. And she went to a convent school, a co-ed, then moved on to a city for higher studies. Professional career has taken her to places within India and beyond across industries and people. She leans on her curiosity to know things unknown that sees her connecting to local people, food, and culture. Yes, you guessed it right, it's me and my growing up. Currently, I lead the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategy to Action Plan for Boeing in India and stand in as the interim leader for APAC and Australia, touching people, processes within and beyond the organizational boundaries through supplier diversity programs, community outreach, university relations, and nurturing external technical affiliations. Life experiences has probably been my biggest teacher, and each experience has strengthened my commitment to the cause of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I self-affirm and reaffirm each day to use my privileges to be the voice of change, contributing towards a sustainable and inclusive ecosystem. A dedicated student of life, I believe in promoting expression of differences to create differences that matter. Coaching, counseling, empowering, and building inclusion capability, cultivating trust, psychological safety, and accountability in the ecosystem. It's a top priority to move the needle and create more equitable workplace, impacting every touch points in an employee life cycle. That's all about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it all starts with learning, keeping self-awareness quotient high. So diversity is in nature, as I continue to say. Inclusion is all about intentional nurture, and equity is an approach to it if we are to create a level playing field. I thank Team SpeakIn and Deepshikha for fueling me with renewed energies to do more of what I do by infusing passion to purpose. This recognition means a lot, and I live this moment with gratitude. It's great to be here with change makers and influencers of the Asia region. I'm definitely taking back many lessons. Thank you, Team SpeakIn, for gifting me this experience. Over to you.
Nandini, what an absolutely beautiful speech, and love the story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Nandini. We now go to Preeti D'mello. The citation first, Mimi.
Preeti, for devising and implementing strategies to embed new behaviours and truly understanding what diversity is as a business imperative for us today. We would love to hear from you.
Good morning,
Preeti.
good afternoon.
Wonderful.
My apologies that I'm not with you in person. I had a sweet personal emergency that has come up, and there's this recorded message. My name is Preeti D'mello. I work with TCS, and I am the global head of diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as the Lead Academy. Now, these two functions are interrelated. One that focuses on the big picture of what we need to do, and the Lead Academy on what are the developmental initiatives that can actually help us learn how to be more inclusive, more equitable. We've done a lot of work in the last, say, 3-4 years, which me and my team are extremely proud of. And I really appreciate this opportunity from SpeakIn with Asia Dialogues to be acknowledged for the work we've done. It's wonderful. I think it's wonderful to be acknowledged at whatever stage of our lives we might be. Thank you very much to all of you, and my apologies again for not being able to join you in person.
Thank you, Preeti. Sanjeev.
Yes, please welcome Duncan Hewett.
Duncan, congratulations on your award today for espousing the cause of workplace gender diversity and for consistently driving acceleration for women all across leadership levels. Congratulations, and we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Mimi. Delighted to be here, and I guess thank you for the recognition from the whole team at SpeakIn. Congratulations to all my fellow awardees. I think my message is there are many things we can do, and it's a journey about making a difference. We started a journey 3.5 years ago, actually at 2:30 a.m. on a red-eye flight on the way back from Bangalore to help women return to the workforce. And that journey started with, a bold idea. What if we could help with enablement? And what if we provided that free? And would that make a difference to help women come back into the workforce? I sit here today, we've helped now over 3,600 women in India return into the IT workforce, and we have 16,000 women in the program today. And looking forward, we've just announced new goals to try and help 100,000 women across Asia, Pacific and Japan. Start with an idea, passionately lead it, and build a team around you, and it's amazing what you can achieve. So thank you so much for recognising it. Our program's called TARA, for those of you who want to look up. So we have led that program over the last 3.5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Sanjeev.
Yes, we will now welcome Bianca Stringuini.
Bianca, congratulations. Thrilled to have you here. We want to award you today for your sterling work in creating and implementing D&I strategies for several Fortune 500 companies across multiple markets. What an accolade. And we'd love to hear what you want to say.
Oh, thank you, Mimi, and thank you, Sanjeev, and thanks everyone in SpeakIn for this great honor. I'm very humbled by it, especially amongst this really steam collection of D&I champions that really truly move the needle. I think you you can talk a lot about inclusion, diversity, equity. It can become a very soft topic, but it's very important to see that, you know, all of us and the panelists, you know, could show and demonstrate with data and with the, you know, actions that it makes a difference, that it does bring, you know, growth and sustainability to the world. And I do think that, I hope that we are really thinking about inclusion, diversity, equity as intrinsic in terms of, you know, prosperity, that we don't have anymore these conversations about, is it true? Do we have to prove it? I think we move beyond the path of proving it as a point. We are really have to say, no, this is absolutely fundamental for us to achieve a sustainable future, a future of growth for this planet. So I hope that, you know, this here for me is a great demonstration that there are, you know, warriors at work, but we need all, and we need everyone to understand that, you know, there is really no difference, that we are just a very big we. So thank you for this. I'm very humbled for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. We will now welcome Lynette Pathy.
Lynette, congratulations on your award today for consistently working towards creating a psychologically safe space and environment where diversity and inclusion can truly thrive. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much to the SpeakIn team for this recognition. It really is an absolute honor to be a part of this amazing group of leaders and champions in the D&I space. I'm Lynette Pathy. I currently run employee engagement and inclusion diversity at Foodpanda. And I'm also on the board of Girls in Tech Singapore, where we strive to empower girls and women and men to drive equality in the STEM industry. So for me, diversity and inclusion is important for me, and I think for everyone in this group, to create an inclusive and psychologically safe environment for all those around us, and to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. I'm really excited about what the future holds for growth in D&I as we move forward. And I really hope that we can all keep learning and sharing. Thank you to the team. And thank you, everyone. And congratulations to everyone.
Thank you, Lynette. We'll now move. It's time to welcome Kaveree Bamzai.
Kaveree, congratulations for being such an eloquent writer and spokesperson across all kinds of issues related to women, to diversity and inclusion. We would love to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you so much, everyone, especially to Deepshikha and the SpeakIn team. It's so delightful to be here. I'm really honored, and it was wonderful to listen to everyone today. I just wanted to take a moment to highlight the role that journalists like me can play, in whatever small way. I think there are three aspects to it. One is articulation. If we do not hear the words, we will not be able to do anything or start a conversation. I come from a journalistic career that I began about 34 years ago. That's a long time. And I remember there was a time when sexual harassment was called eve teasing, and stalking on screen by the male heroes in Bollywood was considered romance. So we've come a long way since then. And I think that has happened because we've changed the language that we've used. We've called out people who think stalking is romantic. We've called out people who've used soft terms like eve teasing when, it's actually sexual harassment, it's molestation. So I think articulation is the most important thing. You cannot change anything if you do not have the language or the capacity to address it. That's one. What articulation does is also start a conversation. And I think SpeakIn is a wonderful example of that. If you do not have conversations, there is no way that you can get people together and change the way they think or reinforce the way they think in whatever way. There's no point in preaching to the converted. You have to expand your sphere of influence. That happens when you have conversation with more and more diverse groups. again, I want to bring in when I started in journalism. I'm sorry, I sound like one of those real old people, but we didn't even understand what LGBTQI meant. And I remember as recently as about 3 years ago at an edit meeting, I had to explain to the editors, who were all male, by the way, what each letter of that alphabet stood for. And again, you know, these are things that we have seen changing over the past few decades, the past few years. And that has happened because people have spoken up, people have written, people have started conversation. So articulation, conversation, and the last really is action. And that is something that we see here again. If you do not have conversations, you cannot not actually begin to change things. You have to, you cannot talk about sexual harassment and then not have a committee in place, as we saw, you know, at the beginning when we started the Vishaka rules. We had organizations that didn't even have committees in place, or if they had committees in place, they were staffed mostly by people from within the organization. So there was no diversity perspective to it. And of course, then, you know, it translates into hiring, it translates into the way you see the world. So really, these 3 points for me are the most important. And I think as a working journalist, it's something that I try and keep at the forefront of everything that I write: articulation, conversation, and action. Thank you so much again for having me here and for giving me this award.
Sure. Thank you, Kaveree. It's now time to welcome Daniel Clarke.
Daniel, congratulations for your exceptional work in managing multicultural and multi-location teams and working with these specialists all across Asia Pacific to create change. Congratulations, and we'd love to hear from you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Singapore. First of all, I'd like to thank Team SpeakIn for this wonderful award, which I've received. To say that I am both humbled and honoured in equal measure would be a bit of an understatement. So thank you very, very much for this award that I've received today. Also, I'd like to send out a big congratulations to my fellow D&I champions for their awards also. All very, very well deserved. And, you know, it's just so wonderful to be included in a group of such inspirational people like yourselves. There's not too much that I want to add in relation to why D&I is important. I think much of that's been covered today, but there is 2 things that I would like to touch on, if I may. So I am a senior business development manager at Kennedy's, which is an international law firm. And I think the legal industry has a bit of a reputation when it comes to D&I. And when I first came into law, it's fair to say there wasn't many staff members who looked like myself. And I think it was probably a combination of thinking and not understanding the opportunities that people like me can have in law, as well as the industry itself. I started a long, long time ago, but I'm just so pleased to say that we've come such a long way in relation to D&I. Still lots of work to do, of course, but you know, the journey has been very, very positive up until this point. And I'm very, very pleased and honoured to be working at a firm like Kennedy's, which takes D&I as seriously and as passionately as I do. So kudos to Kennedy's as well, because I really do feel that I'm at a place where I can espouse the positivity and the virtue of why D&I is important each and every day. And secondly, I guess I just want to just thank everybody at this event today, as well as my fellow D&I champions, because oftentimes when you're working in D&I, you can often feel alone. You can often feel like you're fighting a battle that nobody else understands. That's definitely not the case, of course, but you know, when the lights are off and you're alone and you're thinking of you know, ways to kind of help people understand why D&I is important, there is a feeling of being alone sometimes. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody at this awards event today, because you know, my passion for D&I remains, but it's definitely been reinvigorated by hearing all the wonderful stories from everybody that's been shared, and as I said, my fellow D&I champions. So thank you, everybody.
Many thanks, Daniel. And finally, may I call upon Angel Kilian.
Angel, last but definitely not least. Congratulations, Angel, for espousing the cause of diversity and inclusion so passionately, and to make workplaces genuinely far more inclusive for everyone. So thank you so much for being here, and please do go ahead and tell us what this means to you.
Thank you, Mimi. Thanks, Sanjeev. And thank you so much for the certificate. Oops, I think it got blended. I was just telling my husband the last time I got a proper certificate was probably in secondary school. So this is very much welcomed. We're definitely going to be framing it up. But congratulations also to so many of you. I've seen so much of your content. I've seen the way you show up day in, day out on social media, on online, on offline platforms as well. So to be included in this group of people means a lot to me, and I'm very, very appreciative. I'm not going to speak much about what diversity and inclusion means to me. I think a lot of you have already covered it, but I think what we know is, building diverse and inclusive workplaces, it's not a one-person show. It's not a zero-sum game. We're all on a journey together as well. So being able to be part of this group, having the network, seeing what all of you are doing together each day really encourages me. So thank you again, SpeakIn, and thank you all of you for being part of this journey.
Thank you so much, Angel. And over now to Mimi.
Well, first, I want to say congratulations to all of you today for really being a beacon of change and transformation in all of your countries and your roles around the world. It has definitely been inspiring listening to you. So congratulations, and we're all extremely proud of the progress that you're making and that we are all making in our areas. So as we move towards the close of our event today and we end off SpeakIn Asia's Dialogues, Diversity and Inclusion Summit, which of course is in partnership with HDSC Ergo Sharing Circles, I'm going to invite one final person to the stage. It's Afaz Ansari. He's the Vice President of Marketing at SpeakIn, and he's going to propose the vote of thanks and the close for the event today. So Afaz, welcome.
Thank you, Mimi. Good afternoon. I'm Afaz. Well, it's been a fantastic day full of learning, different perspectives on D&I. Today, it's my privilege and honor to thank everyone who's contributed to making this event successful. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our keynote speaker, Nandini Sarkar, and our panelists, Anthea Collier, Michael Brown, Alexander Krasavan, Rennie Tan, Aravinda Gujral, and Sudakshana Bhattacharya. Not to forget, the SpeakIn Asia D&I champions. Well, it's been inspirational to make an acquaintance with your exemplary work. In the end, it's my duty to thank our partners for the event, HDFC Ergo Sharing Circle, WEFT, Wiki, Karma Foundation, and also the backend team from SpeakIn and partners who planned this event for us. In the closing, let me say that all of us thrive in an environment that respects us and allow us to feel included, feel safe to learn, feel safe to contribute, and feel safe to challenge the status quo. Diversity and inclusion are precious. I hope all of you will carry forward this message and help us eliminate the D&I movement. I would like to close this event that we all have put together with a small video. Thank you.